This is Life Science, Unit 7, Part 3. Please start by turning to page 7 in your packet. We're going to start at the top of the page. And today we're going to start learning a little bit about Charles Darwin. So, Charles Darwin was from England. He was a young naturalist, and we're going to start today with a short video that will give you a little background information about Charles Darwin.
Charles Darwin was born in England in 1809. He was a keen naturalist and geologist who made detailed observations about the natural world. Darwin first became interested in nature while studying theology at Cambridge, where he developed a passion for beetle collecting, which was encouraged by his cousin William Fox. During this time, Darwin learned many important scientific skills, including species identification, how to catalog specimens, and fieldwork. At the age of 22, Darwin joined a 5-year voyage on the Navy survey ship the HMS Beagle in order to serve as a naturalist and companion to Captain Robert Fitzroy. Although a junior naturalist, Darwin was already skilled in both biology and geology, and he was expected to closely observe both plants and animals as well as rock formations. Whilst on board the Beagle, Fitzroy presented Darwin with an important book called Principles of Geology. This helped him to understand how landscapes changed as a result of geological processes, and led to Darwin suggesting that coral reefs in the Pacific Ocean developed as a result of tectonic plate movement. The most famous destination during the voyage of the Beagle was the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America, where Darwin spent 5 weeks studying a variety of animal and plant life, including finches, tortoises, and mockingbirds in particular. During the 5-year voyage of the HMS Beagle, Darwin collected thousands of natural specimens of birds, plants, and fossils from across the globe, including 13 species of finch taken from some of the Galapagos Islands. Darwin kept detailed notes of all that he saw during his long voyage, and these, together with his diaries, formed the basis of his book, Journal of Researches, which was later to become famously known as The Voyage of the Beagle. Darwin called his trip on the HMS Beagle by far the most important voyage of my life. Upon his return to the UK, Darwin became puzzled by the geographic distribution of wildlife and fossils he had collected on the voyage. He noticed that whilst there were species of animal that existed unchanged across the globe, some other species showed physical differences based on the ecological habitat from which they came. This was particularly apparent in his observations of the Galapagos finches, which showed variations in their beaks and claws depending on the type of food that was available to them. After extensive investigation and discussion with other scientists, Darwin developed the idea that all species evolve through a process of natural selection, where certain members successfully adapt to cope with changes in their habitat, and others that fail to adapt eventually die out. This theory was later published in his book, On the Origin of Species. In this video, you have learned the importance of observation in the development of one of the most famous biological theories of all time. What else can you find out about Darwin's life as a naturalist?
All right, so at the top of page 7, we're starting right there about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a naturalist that was from England. He lived from 1809 to 1882. He was actually born the same day as President Abraham Lincoln, just on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And as you saw, he traveled the world as a naturalist that went along to help study different things that they would find on this trip. And so he was only at this point, he was pretty young, he was only like 20, in his early 20s. But he went along to try to learn about the world and bring back samples to bring back to England. So the observations that he made on this trip caused him to wonder about where different species came from. He made lots of observations, as you saw in the video. And over his lifetime then, using these observations as the initial basis of what he was developing, he developed his theory of evolution by natural selection and found the evidence to support it. So that theory states that organisms with the traits best suited to their environment are more likely to survive and reproduce. And we're going to go into the details about that more in the next section. But an example of this
Although he didn't
is
realise it
right
at the
here in
time,
this video.
the most important specimens that Charles Darwin brought back from the Galapagos were finches. Initially, he wasn't sure how they were related, but when, back in England, they were examined by the ornithologist John Gould, he reported that in fact Darwin had brought back 13 different species of finch, all of which were unique to the Galapagos. This realization played a significant role in Darwin's formulation of his theory of evolution. The most important differences between the finches came in their beaks. Some were large, some were small. Each one was suited to the availability of particular foodstuffs. Eventually, Darwin theorized that different species of finch had evolved on different islands, their distinctive beaks being an adaptation to distinct natural habitats or environmental niches. In the years since Darwin's visit, many other scientists and ornithologists have come to the Galapagos to study its finches. In this experiment, researchers are observing the woodpecker finch, using this wooden box to stand in for a tree. The woodpecker finch is one of the only birds to use tools to help it find food. A stick or small twig enables it to dig deeper into tree bark for insect larvae. This skill enables it to survive in conditions which other birds would find difficult. In the dry season, it can gather up to 50% of its food in this way. Woodpecker finches are hungry birds, which in the wild need to eat every 3 hours, so they never turn down the chance of a free meal.
So this example about Darwin's finches, what he noticed was that the finches with the large beaks had the ability to crack seeds were better suited to survive and reproduce on an island where that was the food source. So he noticed that there was these changes that had happened in species of finches that matched the food source that was available to them. And he thought that was just really interesting. All right, so what you're going to do next now is go over to page 6, and now we're going to use box number 3. And I'd like you to start, please, on box number 3 by putting the title Darwin's Finches. And I'm going to show you another little video. And as you're watching, what you'll be doing after the video is, in your own words, writing about Darwin finches. So this is meant to help you, again, review this concept one more time so that afterwards you are prepared to write about it. All right, so here is the video about the finches.
What are Darwin's finches, and why are they so important to biologists? The study of finches led to the development of one of the most important scientific theories of all time. But how did this come about? In December 1831, a naturalist called Charles Darwin boarded the HMS Beagle bound on a surveying voyage to South America. Whilst the ship and crew carried out coastline surveys, Darwin was free to explore the islands en route. In 1835, the Beagle arrived at the Galapagos Islands near Ecuador. What Darwin found there surprised him greatly. As well as giant tortoises and marine iguanas, Darwin collected and preserved a variety of different songbirds called finches. Upon returning to the UK, he examined them together with ornithologist John Gould and made some fascinating discoveries. The scientists observed that the birds were all similar to a single type of finch found on mainland South America, suggesting that these mainland finches had originally colonized the island. However, the Galapagos finches were all slightly different from the original mainland species, and they were also different from each other. The finches on each island showed distinct variations in their overall size, beak shape, and claw size. These differences were attributed to the differing food sources available on the various islands of the Galapagos. Some of the birds had long, thin beaks and sharp claws suited to catching and eating insects, while others had large, powerful beaks suitable for cracking open nuts. Because of the distances between the islands, breeding between different species of finch was unlikely, and Darwin concluded that the finches must have evolved over time from the original mainland species to suit the conditions found on each individual island. In all, 13 of the birds brought back by Darwin were identified as being entirely new species, all similar to each other, but with definite variations from their common ancestor. Darwin proposed that the variations seen both within and between the finch species arose by chance. Variations which gave any individual a competitive advantage made them more likely to survive and therefore reproduce, outcompeting those with less advantageous characteristics. Darwin called this theory natural selection, and he published it in his book On the Origin of Species in 1859. Evolution by natural selection is now widely agreed to be the most accurate theory to explain the origin and diversity of all life on Earth. In this video, you have learned how the finches of the Galapagos Islands led to the development of the theory of evolution by natural selection. Is evolution of these birds still happening? See what you can find out.
All right, so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. In box number 3, I'm going to ask you in your own words to tell the story of Darwin's finches. All right, so this is kind of a quick write. The exact format you use is not that important, but go through and explain what we mean when we're talking about Darwin's finches and what we have learned from that. All right, here's your 3-minute timer. Go.